Now, number 8, we're still in C major, we're in 3/4 time. We have a dotted rhythm in the right hand. Let's just go over how to count that first of all. Most of you know how to do this, of course. But so I'm doing the right hand in measure 1. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. Like that. So the dotted quarter note, it's worth the value of a quarter note plus half again. So it's worth the value of a quarter note, then you have to wait for an extra 8th note, and then of course you play on the 8th note after that. The most common mistake would be to play the note after it too soon, meaning not holding the dotted note long enough. So a dotted note will always have 3 subdivisions to it. Extra long, extra long. That's, some people like to count like that through them. So this piece, I thought I would give a few tips on reading the ledger lines. So that expression, ledger lines, when we're reading music, of course, we have 5 staff lines. When we have notes that go either above or below that, we add extra little lines. We call those ledger lines. Comes from the French, because they used to be written very lightly, those lines. And of course, that's a familiar word, leggero, meaning lightly. So the ledger lines are actually very easy to read as long as you're reading by intervals. Let's look at measure 15. So that's the second last measure in the first half of the piece. So in measure 15, we have a G, and then we have an octave. So that's an interval that hopefully we'll begin to recognize. The octave is one of the intervals that we see a lot of in piano music, especially when you have a large interval. The octave is really the most common. Remember, an octave, it's always going to be a note on a space and a note on a line. So if both of them are on a line or both of them on a space, that would not be an octave for sure. Let's go back one measure and a bit before that. So at the end of measure 13, we have an A with the thumb. We're going up a 4th. So that note with the 2 ledger lines, above the 2 ledger lines, is going to be a D, because there was an A, and we're going up a 4th. Let's go another measure back. So at the end of measure 12, second finger's on a B, and we're going up a 4th. So that high note, 3 ledger lines, is an E there. Let's skip to measure 19 and practice this a little bit more. So look at measure 19. So we have our thumb on an E, and then what interval do you see? Hopefully you see an octave there. So that's E and up an octave. Let's skip forward a few measures. So measure 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 23. Our thumb is on an A, and hopefully we see another octave. So that's a high A there. No one expects you to memorize that high A looks like that. But you just read it in relation to the intervals, the notes around it. Usually the note before it, I would say. And then right near the end of this piece, we have another series of notes on ledger lines. So measure 26, 7, 8. Let's go from measure 28. So of course we have a 4th here. We're putting our thumb on the C. That's easy because we already played that note, right? That's easy to read, that C. And it's actually a note that I would want you to memorize. Going up by thirds, down a third, up a fourth. Okay? And this is so high that I have to adjust my camera. I'm going from the same spot again. So here's that fourth. Now I'm going to put my thumb on the note that my fourth finger is on. We're going up by thirds, down a third, up a fourth. And of course these are scales, octave. I mentioned a second ago that the note at the top of the treble clef with the two ledger lines is a C. That is something that I'd recommend memorizing. And an interesting thing to also memorize, in the bass clef, at the bottom of the bass clef with two ledger lines is also a C. That's a perfect one to memorize, and that'll help you to read basically any note on ledger lines. Just one more thing I wanted to cover before we play through this. The repeated chords. So it happens first in measure 9, and then it happens again in measure 25. It's actually the same music happening in two different keys. The repeated chords, make sure you, maybe let's try doing a little crescendo through them. What we want to avoid is playing them all the same, right? So you could either do that, or else you could do a decrescendo through them. Or some kind of combination. But again, you want to avoid doing the repeated notes all the same. There has to be some kind of shape to it. So let's play this through. Allegretto con moto. So a little bit slower than an allegro, that means. Con means with, and moto, like motion. So it's a little bit slower than an allegro, but it has motion, has movement. 1, 2, 3. Really nice little piece. Reminds me kind of birds singing. That section there. The chords in the left hand, we did depart from the key of C major, right? The first 10, really the first 8 measures were in C major, where we have mostly just tonic and dominant chords. Once you get to measure 9, you notice that all of the Fs from measure 9 through measure 16, they all have a sharp on them. and we're no longer in the key of C major, we're really in the key of G major there. G major has the F sharp, right? And then in the second section of this piece, we're coming back to C major. We very briefly stopped through the key of F major, so that would be measure 18, 19, 20. Measure 21 and 22, you see the B flats there. So for a couple of measures, it sounds like we're in the key of F major. So very nicely written piece.